Walsh, your host in Hiroshima, Japan. And today I am talking with the amazing sustainability expert consultant based now in Kyoto, Akira Sakano. Thank you for joining, Akira.
Thank you so much.
It's so nice to have you here. I met you many years ago when I visited
Right.
Kamikatsu. That seems like a long time ago, and I brought my son who is now almost 19, so
Oh.
that was probably about 6 years ago, I believe.
Yeah, I believe so too. Oh my god.
And you did so much amazing work in Kamikatsu, creating the Zero Waste Academy, working together with government and the local community. One of the things that I often refer back to about the kamikatsu example is how you were not only focused on zero waste, of course, zero waste is important, but you were also working on the social side, making employment for the grannies or the local people, talking to the local people and finding out what needs they had and trying to create programs that worked for them as well. And I've used examples from the work you've done for many talks and many of my research papers. So thank you so much for everything you've done.
Thank you so much. Yeah, well, Kamikatsu itself has been working on like zero waste policies, or even before we call it zero waste, it's been there as the resident residential members' contribution towards reducing waste and so on. So it's has a really long history. So I'm just part of the history. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, nice. That's very humble. You are so active in so many ways, and I'm so excited to talk about some of them today. So you're based in Kyoto now, and you're running the Zero Waste Japan network, which is kind of consulting and doing events. Can you tell us some of the things that Zero Waste Japan is doing?
Sure. So we founded Zero Waste Japan in the very end of 2019, and then I left Kamikatsu in like April 2020. So from then, we officially started Zero Waste Japan as an organization. So it is a registered organization. So we do consultancy, think tank kind of work. So we work with both municipality and communities, which of course utilize our experience back in Kamikatsu. But at the same time, we want to really create like different approaches, different models based on different socio-economic backgrounds in different communities or the municipal area. So that's what we are doing. So we work both with like municipal government when they are already interested in doing zero waste. But at the same time, we also work with like community-based organizations or the resident group to kind of create also the bottom-up approach for the project basis. So we could potentially also connect it to the policy in the longer run. So that's what we do. At the same time, we also work with corporations, businesses, sometimes with the big ones, but at the same time, we really want to engage SMEs, small to medium enterprises, who are the majority exists in Japan, especially when we talk about the rural communities or rural areas in Japan. So we recently just had this event. You're showing up, sustainability talks. So it's like a casual, like you have a tea with you to talk about the sustainability, but for mainly focusing on the SMEs, like how they can start driving or how they can work on sustainable actions, while of course they have more limitation in terms of human resources, finance, and everything, especially with COVID situation. But yeah, we talked about like in which sectors or what kind of condition you can work with others. And then also the partnership is definitely the key for driving sustainability with the small scale businesses. That's what we do. And then with the
Are you
background,
thinking,
yeah.
sorry, are you thinking of doing more events like this? This was such a wonderful event, and it featured so many great examples of entrepreneurs, small businesses, innovators around Japan, different areas, and also, a good discussion of some of the hurdles involved.
Sure.
Not only the amazing success, but also along the way, all the important steps, right?
Yeah, true. Thank you, JJ, for joining the event, actually. So it was really interesting. Yes, we are actually thinking of continuing something similar, but this was really our trial. Like we had 3 days with like different time schedules. So for example, we set the afternoon session for 2:30 to 5-ish, where we kind of tried to set to engage, for example, like restaurants or the cafes who's kind of having like all the way business hours like throughout the day. So it might be difficult for them to join such event in general. So we try to set it like easier timing. Then we also had like after 6:30 in the evening for the general business people. So we had like 2 sets of the sessions per day for 3 days in a row. So that was really hectic. But yeah, we will have it like the smaller scale probably for, but more frequent basis, we hope. But it will, of course, depends on like how we're gonna create the engagement process with the SMEs and so on. But
It
yeah,
was,
we
it
are
was
eyeing that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was wonderful and a nice balance of you had interesting presenters. You also had speed networking. So a lot of the attendees are, of course, seeking sustainability in their lives or business. So it was so nice to meet a variety of people from around Japan who are making efforts to be more sustainable, right? Wonderful.
Right.
Before we move on, I just want to mention in the poster today, you're wearing a very special jacket. Now, this is something I remember. I bought one in Kamikatsu too. Can you tell us about this jacket? I love it.
Right, thank you. So in the picture, the pink one, right? So this is the upcycled product in Kamikatsu, where it's called Kuru Kuru Craft Center. So we hired, not hired, we actually partner with local grannies, especially, or women who has sewing skills in general. And then we ask them to kind of utilize, for example, discarded kimono fabric, or this one specifically is the carp flag fabric. So in the on the Children's Day in May 5th, all over Japan, we have like tons of carp flags flying
Yeah.
in the air. Yeah.
I
Then,
visited I visited the nearby dam in Hiroshima the other day, and they have all the carp streamers across the dam, the water area, and it reminded me so much of Kamikatsu and all these beautiful giant koi carp streamers that you have there. And then, of course, like you mentioned when I visited the shop, when some of the streamers become old and they can't use them for the banner anymore, to reuse them into jackets or bags or other products, upcycling. Such a great idea, and it's so colorful and cute. I love it.
right, these products actually appeals more to international customers. Then yeah, we actually had really interest coming from overall. So yeah.
That's awesome. Well, today I really wanted to focus on the accreditation system, which I was so excited to see that you launched in 2017. Can you give us kind of an introduction and then we'll go step by step through the different labels?
Sure. So Zero Waste Accreditation was founded when I was in Kamikatsu, with the background of, for example, in Kamikatsu, the general is all the residents participate in the waste segregation, which is massive of 45 categories right now. And then, of course, that drives kind of intention towards like how we can reduce the waste and so on. So what? First of all, while the residents are participating in the waste segregation, also the local businesses are. But for the businesses, of course, it's harder because they receive customers, and then like especially from the outside, people might not know about like what's going on. At the same time, like some people actually expect to see more zero waste actions when they're in Kamikatsu. But of course, it's difficult to showcase what's going on as our operation in the backyard to the customers. So, for example, like we have our hotel slash onsen facility in Kamikatsu, which receives the most of the people who visit Kamikatsu as a tourist or whoever coming to study about what we are doing in Kamikatsu. While the hot spring or the hotel receive so many people, they are actually doing waste segregation in the backyard for more than 20 categories. So in a room, if you stay, there's only like one box for the waste, but they are actually segregating all the way in the backyard and people don't see it. This has pros and cons, like people who come to like stay and relax. Of course, they don't want to see like all the waste bins lining up. But like some people who's actually expecting to come to Kamikatsu to see zero waste, they're like, what's going on? This is not working. So there's a gap between like, we want to, of course, let people kind of know about like what we are doing. At the same time, we also want to recognize the efforts of the businesses who's actually, working hard to contribute to zero waste projects. At the same time, when we even talk about waste reduction side, not just the segregation, it is difficult to present what's not there. So for example, if you do not use, let's say, straws in the cafes, and then it is difficult to recognize things that not existing. Instead of like presenting what we have is really easier compared to that. So that's why we wanted to have kind of visibility to help communicate what we are trying to do for the businesses in Kamikatsu who's trying to go more zero waste, or at least, collaborating or cooperating with us for doing zero waste. So that was really the background of what we had. Then, so Zero Waste Accreditation, as you said, was founded in 2017, especially focusing on cafes or restaurant, these food sectors, because that was the majority rising up in Kamikatsu that time. So that was the only reason we started from the food sector. But yeah, so we have
talk about some of these labels, and then we're going to talk about labels specific to the apparel industry.
Sure.
But this first set of labels, the most important maybe is the zero waste label. Is that right?
Okay, so the Black Zero Waste label is an overall accreditation label for example, this one with the weight design. This is for the food sector. So we have different design per sector categories. Then the rest, now we are seeing like 6 categories. Actually, now we expanded into 8 categories for the food accreditation, but each has different meanings for category. Basically, we focus on like action-based approach for accreditation. So instead of, for example, having like certain like numbers of for example, outcome-wise, how much % you have reduced waste is the way to kind of certify something. Then we accredited something. So meaning that we actually look into their efforts and actions, and based on what they are doing, we are trying to visualize what they are doing. So that's the kind of difference between like what we see as certification versus what we take it as accreditation. So for example, just to give an example, let's say now we see returnable as a like mark. So this brown returnable one is to accredit the efforts of the shop trying to reduce all this packaging materials coming into the shop. So they of course need to kind of work and negotiate with their suppliers and say, hey, can we change the package into like, for example, returnable as it's written, so that they can return to the supplier, they can reuse it and so on. Or of course, making the efforts themselves. Yeah.
I have a dream that someday all bento shops, all takeout shops will have a returnable system. right? And all convenience stores will have some kind of returnable system. How many people do you see eating convenience store food in front of the convenience store? So there's no reason not to have returnables, right? If you've got onigiri, the rice ball, why not on a plate? You can eat it, you can give it back, it's washed and reused. It just seems perfect. Or bento boxes, you can have the higher quality ekiben, the bento boxes for the stations all around Japan, using the same beautiful design. That would be great branding, not only for the business, but for Japan as a destination. For visitors, they would love that, right? So there's so much appeal. It's not just about reducing waste. What you're trying to promote, what we hope sustainable businesses will take on, is great branding, and it shows a higher quality image for Japan and their shop, right?
True, very true. So yeah, for example, there's new moves for using like returnable or reusable cups or bento boxes for certain areas scope. Because like, yeah, I really agree with your dream. I envision that's the same. At the same time, knowing the current supply chain of like all these convenience stores and so on, that's too far to like go back and forth, and also for, including washing streams and so on. But like, sorry, that's why I focus on like the community scale or like smaller scale in terms of the area wise, because if it's smaller as all the circulation or, the supply chain itself, then we can actually do it like more flexibly. So like if it's like only within the shops of certain area, then even if you like buy somewhere, eat somewhere, you could return to there. Or like you can even create the returning scheme. Like if the shops are registered in the same system, then you can return at any shops, even if you buy on the shop A, but you don't necessarily returning at shop A. So this kind of network or partnership really matters in terms of like actually having the feasibility in this kind of returnable scheme. So yeah, that's just my perspective. Yeah.
In the sustainability event, you had a few owners of small businesses talk about doing the accreditation.
Right.
How many accreditation shops do you sponsor or collaborate with around Japan? Do you have a number you could
Good
tell?
question. So we have accreditation currently for the food, which includes restaurants or the cafes. And then we have for the apparel shops as well. Then we just launched yesterday for the co-working or the shared offices version of the accreditation. So now we have 3 categories. So the co-working version, like we only have one partner who we created together for that accreditation scheme itself. For the apparel, good question. I just counted last week, but let me see. It's less than 10-ish. Yeah, not that many. Same for the food. We actually had certain like increase and decrease in terms of like, this is like 1 year for the renewal. So some people got that in the beginning, they didn't renew it. So now we are not counting, but like if we just count overall, like who got, then we might have more than 10. So
that's great. And then one thing I really admired you were doing from the time I visited in Kamikatsu many years ago was also having open communication with companies, trying to get companies to think about packaging, to think about how they can make more recyclable packaging or less wasteful packaging. You're also doing a collaboration with Zojirushi, is that right? About bring your own bottle here?
Right. So since for the cafes accreditation, we have this BYO, bring your own category, which for the cafe owners or the restaurant owners to say that, we are receiving your, customers bringing your own like cups or bottles or even like containers for the takeaways. So yeah, we wanted to kind of promote this context So we partnered with Zojirushi, who has been doing this campaign for like Kyucha Spot. This is this is kind of registering shops or the cafes as a place for people who can bring in their bottles and like refill the teas. So they are partnering with like Japanese tea association kind of, and then to promote that concept
I
along the
love
way.
it.
Yeah,
Is the elephant kind of the mascot for this
Zojirushi.
Zojirushi
Yeah,
system? Because I was
yeah.
thinking the elephant's spout looks like a tea kettle you can refill. So it's like a perfect mascot, isn't it?
That's interesting view. That's the first time I kind of thought about it, but yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And you got an award, is it, that you're holding in the picture?
Actually, this is a partnership kind of
Partnership.
setting. So
So
we
cute.
partners with Zojirushi for co-promoting the BYO concept. So I think that was back in like 2018-ish. So yeah, now I also do have Zojirushi bottle. It's kind of coming off, but like we created like zero waste bottles for
Oh, nice.
kamikatsu residents or
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah,
And this, of course, works really well together with the Maimizu app, which you
true.
had one of the Maimizu founders at your latest event talking about having an app to find refill locations for water around Japan. So this is a big hurdle in Japan still to be able to find even water or tea to refill, right?
True. Yeah. Well, Mariko, the one with the Miami's co-founder, she was explaining during the event, and I totally agree that most of the water here in Japan are drinkable from the tap, and then we have so much water as like we are such a rich country in terms of the water. So, but we are consuming so many like PET bottles, all this like vending machines, a huge culture here in Japan. So, but we see a gap between that. So yeah, utilizing of course the tap water in general, but like giving the opportunity in of course at the public space at the same time, even like utilizing like restaurants or cafes or who are offering just to refill the water, then that's really can make like infrastructure in the society for water filling. So
Yeah.
yeah, I really
And
agree that.
we have a comment from Mo NYC. We could use these here, recyclable bento boxes. So that's true. Even outside of Japan, if we start to promote these reusable, high quality concepts for bento or different Japanese culture related things, it can spread to other countries as well. And even sometimes international companies are using Japanese concepts that not even Japan is using, right? Like Lush is using the furoshiki, the knot wraps, and I'm so happy to see that. And I wish more Japanese companies would do that instead of the plastic wrapping, right?
That's true. That's true. Yeah. Like reusable bento boxes they are kind of spreading. For example, like we have a group in Nagano recently just started this Alpaque is a brand name, but like reusable bento box for the cafes to kind of return it at any point kind of system. I think this kind of like returnable system exists a lot for like coffee cups in other countries, but like if they are doing like takeaway system recently, especially under the COVID, maybe the bento box concept also could apply. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Mm.
Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about your label specific for the apparel industry, which is
Sure.
such a big fast fashion is such a big problem around the world, right? So to start to think about how the apparel industry could be more sustainable, this is a great initiative.
True. Yeah. So as as already said, apparel is such a complex industry, I would say. So, but like we for this accreditation overall, we focus on a shop. So instead of like looking at the big brand, like overall, like as a huge brand itself, but like we focus on a shop, what they can do from like bottom up kind of approach. So of course, like in the end, to like actually approach the entire supply chain, of course, you need to work with the brand itself, like the head office and so on. But like to engage the staff who's working at the apparel shop, so like even like having the customer interface. So we see a shop as like a window for both like looking back to the supply chain, at the same time also communicating like what we can provide as an information and create a better approach of the consumption towards the customer as well. So that's how we see a shop really matters, not only the scope of the SMEs. So that's why we kind of look into our, let's say we have, again, less boxes similar to what we saw as returnable. So it's talking about the packaging coming into the shop, or even a shop sending to the customers, for example, using e-commerce, like what kind of thing they can try is that kind of approach. But here, what's interesting maybe compared to the food is we have, for example, this zero waste worker, the yellow logo. So actually we found that it's if I explain it, then that's generally, yeah, everyone would just agree. But the simple thing is that if we look into the actual produced waste of, for example, like cafes and restaurants versus the apparel shop, we actually found a lot of waste coming from like our staff's, for example, bento box or PT bottles, or what they consume as a staff, not just coming from the operations. Because at the cafes or the restaurants, normally they receive food from leftovers or what they're already cooked for their staff to be fed. So they don't really produce waste for like packaging for the food for the staff for their lunch or whatsoever. But like in non-cafe, non-restaurant, non-food sector shops, they actually produce tons of like bento box or like pet bottles and so on. That's why we saw that, of course, like engaging staff not as a part of the operation itself, but also as their consumption habit, or like how they see their own practices of lifestyles would really matter in terms of reducing the waste. So that's why we included this like zero waste worker kind of concept to kind of engage. Yeah.
Fantastic idea to include the activities of the staff and workers as a part of your initiatives. This is always so important, I think, for any business, that customers are very woke now, right? Customers are watching.
Getting to, yeah.
Right? And if a company is saying we are green, we are sustainable, but then the customer sees the staff going in and out to McDonald's and making huge amount of waste every time they eat lunch, that damages the image of the brand, the company, the shop. So you have to walk the walk when you talk the talk, right? So including the workers inside the system is so important. I was glad to see that.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then for apparel specific again, so we have this like repair services if they actually have it, or at least even if they don't directly, if they provide like certain guidelines how to take care this specific clothes as well, that also gives a good like insights of like, for example, like washing frequency, how to wash, like whether or not to use like hot water or whatsoever, that really matters. So like looking into like not just before selling or how they operate within the shop, but after sales is really important in terms of like looking into the entire impact of course waste production wise, but at the same time like it is general context of course for the sustainability. And then not only just providing the let's say repairing service and so on, we put this category called traceable Normally when we think about like traceability in terms of the apparel sector, we kind of think about the production side, like how it's produced. Is it actually fair trade? Like we are not harming any environment in the production side. This is of course very important, but like we put this traceable concept for after we sell. So is there a system actually to follow up like on like same as the retailer, like after the sales, but at the same time, is there a system to even collect it after customers stop using? Or is there like system to also match customers for that, like maybe exchanging their clothes? Like maybe some people don't want to wear the same products anymore, but like is there opportunity provided for the customers to kind of, continue continuously using
Yeah,
the product?
that's so
So yeah,
important.
these are the
Let's
steps.
go back to repair just for a second because I found
Sure.
your photos. But this is something that we've talked about in the series before. So, for example, high-end brands like here you're showing Louis Vuitton. They ask their customers in Japan and probably elsewhere to bring back anything damaged
Yeah.
because they want to repair it. They want you to use it for a long time. Yukari Sweeney, a designer from Japan who's living in London right now, she said she had a old Louis Vuitton bag from her grandmother that she
Oh,
took
wow.
back to a shop, and they were so happy to see it. And they're like, "We don't make this anymore. This is lovely to see." But that whole idea of repairing and using and passing on and using longer is kind of lost in our modern time, right? And it's so nice to have shops which are supporting that, like Patagonia, Montbell, and the other brands, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then we actually do have like repairing services shops in our general like near the station or like anywhere. So like that's not only for the shoes or like keys, but they also do for the clothing as well. So yeah, we kind of need to re-recognize that infrastructure, I would say, already we have in the society. So
Yeah, definitely. So talking about traceable a little bit more, traceable is more about like sourcing the materials, is it? And then thinking about what happens after the product use is finished. Is that right?
yeah, so for example, in this category, we also see if they have the collection system for their own like sold clothes, or if they provide like a platform or the opportunity, even an event to a customer to come bring their, not wearing clothes for the current days and then exchange it with the other customers or something like that. Kind of swap event, right? So, or also the important part is if the shop or with like unsold stocks, what they deal with it, so how they deal with it, right? So this is really critical, that whether like some brands were really accused from like burning them all, but like is there any proper streams to resell or even like recycle in the very end or so on, like what they have as in the system. So just to trace it is really important to look into. So
Yeah, definitely. We have a great comment from Prasanna. Thank you, Prasanna, from Facebook. Thank you, Sakano-san, for your impressive work with Zero Waste Academy. How do we achieve a world similar to Kamikatsu? Should we start with villages around the world? Has any other country taken up such initiatives similar to Kamikatsu? It's a very good question.
Thank you so much. Yeah, well, definitely zero waste is like one of the policy direction that many country-wise or city-wise municipality level, lots of the places has been taking. So yes, but looking at Kamikatsu, it's really our area specific approach as a overall. So like I'm not saying that everyone should do, for example, like 45 categories of waste segregation at all. So approaches needs to vary depending on social demographic, socioeconomic even, the context of the area. So for example, of course, like we really want to see, of course, for example, the national level of the policy to be implemented, for example, for the specific product bans, especially for the plastics, or like even implementing the proper recycling system in the country is, of course, very much a key. At the same time, looking at like more local context, then of course for the implementation of like reduction side of like which connected more with the lifestyles of the people there, or like how the local businesses functions, then that needs to be really customized per area. So there are certain like elements or actual approaches that we can learn and then probably like copy and customize from like what we do in Kamikatsu. But at the same time, we of course need to customize in the very end. So that's why I'm working with different municipalities or the communities now to see what works, like more similar to what we already have done, and then what doesn't work or like what can be created as a new approaches. So I'm really hoping to kind of create more of the options in the world to have, okay, maybe we can choose this if we have this kind of condition. So it could provide more how do I say, the choices of the policy selections. So that's what I'm aiming to work on. But yeah, answering how do we achieve more, then definitely we need like both approaches from like policy creation side, which could be both national, municipal level. At the same time, we of course it's a huge power of like citizens or the groups, whoever are trying to start working on such initiatives. And then it's just, for example, what we help in general is just to fill the gap between policymakers and then what's going on in the ground. So someone needs to kind of fill the gap in the middle. Otherwise, some citizen groups or like even an individual resident who has been working on like certain project of their initiatives always feel kind of well, we have really asked a lot to the municipal government, but since they are too busy, they are not responding, like they reduce the amount of trust with the municipal government. While the government side, like of course they want to engage the resident, they want to listen to them, they want to conduct something meaningful. But at the same time, of course, always they can't just listen to one person, and they need to be neutral or so what. So like actually bridging like what works for them, what doesn't work, like how we can modify it and so on, needs to be coordinated in a better way. So that's what we see. So like someone who could take such roles, if you can be such, then that's really meaningful. At the same time, like if people start to see things are coming up, and of course that can be recognized in various ways. So yeah, that's what I see.
That's a great answer, and that's one of the things that I was so impressed by about the Kamikatsu example is you have a government policy, really good government policy that came because of need. They didn't have a waste system. They had to create some way to reduce waste in the town. They created a policy, but then once they had Zero Waste Academy working as kind of an in between the community and the policy, it's so much more effective. So, would you suggest that model, kind of having a grassroots organization, nonprofit, working between the government policy and the local people, that kind of situation or design for a sustainable community seems to be very effective?
True. I agree in certain level. Like for example, like in Kamikatsu was very specific to zero waste, like topic organization. So Zero Waste Academy was really focusing on like how to accelerate zero waste. But it doesn't necessarily be creating a new organization, but it could be anyone who's interested in taking the role if they are like located locally. So for example, when I work with other municipality, I cannot create like organization everywhere, right? So I partner with the local organization who has the grassroots like movement, not necessarily be even in the sustainability. They work in different contexts, but like we partner with them to have the bridge between like how to engage the local resident, how to engage the other local organization, and so on, so what. And then we can also help to kind of like develop their skills to also communicate with the government side in terms of the waste related topics and so on. So that is feasible. Like we don't need to really look into like creating new organization, but as a context wise of like having someone locally well connected, well established, to have the bridge between like municipality and of course to engage different stakeholders in the community is really a key.
Yeah. There's so many important parts, right? There's the community engagement, listening to what the local need is, making policy. So you need the stick, you need the carrot. What do you see your role as? More the carrot than the stick, or a little bit of both?
Yeah, you need to be both, definitely. Yeah, well, we don't really be a stick towards like local like members, like community residents, like they need carrots in general. um Even for the businesses, right? For the municipality we can be both. Sometimes we can be harsh about like the approach, and then sometimes we need to be a good carrot, coming from the outside, saying recognition from the outside, and this works and this doesn't, and so on. So yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that we haven't talked about yet, which you did a lot of in Kamikatsu, was education. That helping visitors or students or researchers, you had so many researchers, well, like myself, visiting Kamikatsu to learn about the zero waste system and how they could apply it in their own situation. You also created a zero waste game.
Yes. Thank you for the introduction.
About the game.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, so this is my kind of like latter time creation, because I really had this not struggle but the frustration myself, that connecting the actual like elementary school level education programs and then what they could do more in terms of the context. And then of course like it actually worked. I designed this game for elementary school, like fourth grade elementary school, which is like 10 years old kids. But actually, it works a lot for the adults as well. But yeah, so just to explain this about this game. So this game provides a tons of cards that we call it product cards. So these are the product potentially become waste, which I picked all the list from what we actually see in the waste collection center. And then there are like 5R cars, which is reusing. So everything starts from R, right? So reusing, repairing, repurposing, recycling, and rotting. So we have these 5 ways to rescue the potential waste. And then so kids can choose like which like R to use to rescue your certain products you picked up. At the same time, like you don't always have 5 choices all in your hand. So if you don't have the right choice, you actually need to choose between like whether to burn it or bury it, or to refuse it. So meaning like you kind of need to propose what are the alternatives not to use this product from the very beginning. So for example, easy example is of course instead of the plastic bag, you bring your own bag, right? So it's really the easy alternative. But like of course you see lots of different difficult products coming up. So yeah, by doing this, like what to choose from to rescue, at the same time creating the ideas, what's the alternatives, kids tend to have more thinking process, like shifting into think about the alternatives, because actually we set the pointing system. So refusing is the highest point, recycling is the lowest point, and then if you bury or burn, it's negative point, so you lose the point. So this is really to kind of shift the mindset of what you think when you look at the potential waste, or even once you start selecting what you buy or what you get. And then I'd like kids to think in that way, for like, you know, looking into product as not just a potential waste or like, you know, something you can throw away very soon, but this might have a life, kind of that mindset, right? So that's why we have lots of like faces on products. So it's very, you know, relates to the emotional connection. So that's all about the game. And then we also have the event card. For example, showcasing this turn, you can't use recycling card, because recently a country who had received like all this recyclable item just stopped and just banned importing the recyclable, which we know what's actually happening in the world. So that's why you can't do the recycle this turn or something like that. So we incorporate also the social actual context into the game. So that's what we do. Yeah.
Really fantastic. And you have a big fan here in New York, and he's trying to recruit you to go and work in New York to be an advisor for, but you have spoken at Davos, Switzerland. You have done an international TED Talk. People must ask you all the time to come to their country and help in their situation. You must be in high demand. I'm so happy that you're working in Japan, because Japan needs a lot of help too. But have you thought about like making an English version of this game, or working with organizations abroad? Have you done any of that work?
Yeah, true. So we actually do have data version of English. We haven't really printed, or we haven't really published about this game. We are actually working with other like local groups to local translate into their, you know, languages and so on. That's kind of like ongoing back and forth. Yeah. Also, like we are really looking into partnering with local organization in any area. Probably it's we like, since I also worked in Asian countries, I have more attachment, or like time gap wise also. It's easier to work with Asian countries, but like we are very open. Actually, last year, like in the beginning of last year, we also visited Costa Rica to kind of see the partnership, like similar municipality like Kamikatsu, very much in the mountainous area, who's really huge in coffee farming and so on. So we really wanted to kind of start doing something there, but like since the COVID kind of attacked afterwards, so the project itself is still not moving forward. But yeah, definitely we are into the interest for any projects. Yeah.
Yeah, great. It's wonderful to have both, right? It's wonderful to have the international connections, because even in Japan, the government is actually watching what happens about Japan abroad, sometimes more than within Japan, right? Like the famous artist Yayoi Kusama, for her polka dots. She never became famous until she became famous in New York. And then Japan is like, come back, we love you, right? So sometimes having a Japanese concept or a Japanese innovator like you get traction overseas actually comes back and helps Japan as well, right?
Yeah, that's very true. Like that's why when I was in Kamikatsu, I really focused on like having visibility outside Japan, because if within Japan, for example, the tendency we get is like, you know, you're such a small town, that's why you could do it. Like, you know, Kamikatsu is too unique in terms of like looking into any kind of context and so on, so what, which is of course true, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that like what we are doing or what Kamikatsu has done doesn't apply to in any context, right? So, and then also knowing like what's feasible or what's actually was possible could provide like lots of insight in terms of like what people can think around the current existing system. So yeah, that's why that was really a key, definitely. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, people are asking about the website address. So it's zwjapan.org. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Zero Waste Japan. Wonderful. I think you're going to be in high demand now, and people are asking about the game as well.
Good to know.
Is it possible to buy the game from the website?
Yes, but we only sell now the Japanese version. So if people want the English version, it might take some time. But yeah, if someone's really interested in, for example, like partnering with us to publish and to print it locally in your area, we are also welcoming such partner as well. So another thing, yeah.
That's fantastic. Talking about hurdles, what are you kind of focused on? Because I know you do collaborate a lot with businesses making products and the government. What would be the number one thing that you would hope to see this year in terms of government policy or companies changing? Is there anything that you think, if this happens, it would really help sustainability?
Mm,
Like last
very good
last
point.
year, for
Mhm.
example,
Mhm.
Japan banned plastic bags, shopping bags.
Right.
You have to buy them now. That was a nice initiative. Maybe helps people use less bags. Is there anything like that you would hope for?
Well, first of all, I would think that, for example, especially since we work with like local municipal government or local communities, and then in Japan, this is kind of similar to other countries, but municipal governments are the one who decides and then who is responsible for waste collection and waste management in their municipality. So meaning that they are responsible for having a facility, for like having necessary facilities for whether recycling or whether incinerations or so and so on. If they can't build by their own, they need to like contract with like whoever who has it as a company, or even the other cities and so on. And then actually our, of course, municipal government are limited. Of course, the sizes varies, but like they are generally limited with budget, especially the ones who I work with are the smaller municipalities. So they are limited with the budget. So what will happen is, of course, the national government subsidize for example, building incinerators or building the facilities in general. But the money directions had been focusing on like building quite high-tech big facilities for incineration, like incinerators. So with that, like money streams ongoing, the basically municipality would not choose doing more recycling than incineration. And then once the incinerator build, it stays like more than 30 years. So you need to supply waste to kind of cover up the functions of the incinerator. So that kind of like setup of how things are funded, where the money are like, set for the fund is really definitely the key. So right now, for example, the national government just announced for a new policy to kind of start recycling plastic products instead of packaging, instead of not just packaging. But for that, they are kind of setting up the fund for the municipal government to start building plastic recycling facilities. But again, that is just for the fund, like first fund to build it, but it's not for running the facility. And then I think that most of the municipality do not see the value in just receiving the fund to
Yeah.
build new facilities. So like entirety is kind of like where we should fund as a national level versus like how we of course still need to kind of take care of the existing facilities. So overall we need to have the balance for it. And then if you really want to push more for like recycling or having like circularity of the material, we kind of need to have really the recommendation coming from the national policy side attached with the actual like fund streams. So that's really what I want to see. in
That's so
terms of the change.
important.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I learned from visiting you many years ago was the power of composting. And I definitely saw it again when I visited San Francisco and the Recology Waste Recycling Center, and how they're doing curbside compost pickup. And they talked about you have higher value for recyclable materials because the kitchen waste, the food waste is outside of the recyclables. It's separate. And I really saw that in Kamikatsu. You have 100% composting for all residents, all businesses. And when I went home, I tried it myself, and immediately like 50% of my garbage reduced. So having a national 100% composting system would be huge waste reduction and get it back to the earth and create better farms and better dirt, right? It just seems like a no-brainer. What do you think?
Yep. I totally agree. So it's really interesting. Like our recycling rate in Japan is very low compared to other countries. And then this is because of we have incinerator system put up and then to incinerate organic waste. So of course, while organic waste is like, a lot with water, like more than half is like water. And then like burning water doesn't make any sense. And then this is also the reason why we do not reduce plastic waste going to the incinerator, because they want temperature to be set high. So actually, the incinerator operators want plastic waste to be in the incinerator instead of recycling, because to keep the temperature high. So if we actually separate the organic waste, yes, definitely, it would reduce that, like lots of troubles in the incinerator. At the same time, we could reduce the capacity of the incinerator as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Plus, I remember whenever I talk to anybody in waste management anywhere around Japan, I always talk about composting, and I expect them to be resistant, but every time they are very positive about composting and saying it would save the area a lot of money, because then the garbage, you don't have to use as much gas, you don't have to have as much staff picking up many times. So it reduces a lot of the labor emphasis as well. They don't need as much people working on it. And you could do collaborations with farmers. It could reduce their costs. So they were really interested. So why doesn't it happen more? Let's push composting. I love it.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. So yeah, there are several municipalities who actually do composting as an official waste management stream. So they do separate organic waste from the rest of the incineration waste, and then do separate collection. And then they do create like either biogas or like actual fertilizers from there, and then to even like sell the fertilizers back to the community, and it actually is a very good quality. But yeah, that is definitely how it's working in more of the area with farmers, or the farming being one of the majority of the industry. So within the city side, probably just connecting such like farmland kind of outside area of the cities, and then to kind of create the collaboration or partnership between different municipalities and should work. But yeah, these kind of like are, how do I say, creating partnership or cooperation between municipality was designed when the national government was really pushing and implementing the larger scale incinerators. So now why not doing same for the composting? So
Yeah.
I really agree. Yeah.
When I visited Recology in San Francisco and learned
Mm.
about their composting system, and I realized how great it was for the local area agriculture. So California is famous for wine, and their composting, all their residents' kitchen waste is becoming beautiful dirt and then given to the wineries, and then the wineries have a better product. So it really opened my eyes to the whole idea of branding, not only for reducing waste, but it actually improves the brand of all the agriculture around the area. So I would love to see that for Japan. I think that's a great branding activity. We have some comments. Even the word baffles me. Puts head down for composting. I think that's true, right? People think of composting as really hard. When I visited Kamikatsu, everybody who couldn't dig it into a garden was kind of given a subsidy for an electrical composter,
Mm.
and I thought that was a good system. So a lot of
Mm.
people don't have access to garden themselves or a farm, right?
Yep. So yeah, in Kamikatsu, of course, like the municipal government did not collect whether the organic waste or like fertilized, the actual produced fertilizers. So that said, maybe somewhat in the cities, of course, people need things to be collected while they don't have the areas like gardens or like small farm to put into. So the collection system would be, of course, additional things that we kind of need to look around because if we put like additional collection day for like separate organic waste from incineration waste, that actually an add for labor and truck running around in the city. So that is kind of one of the challenging part in municipality. But like if we push for like for example community-based compost or like household-based compost, that's where municipality definitely see the value of it.
Yeah.
At the same time, like we also could tie up with like different uh, stakeholders locally. So, for example, business waste, especially let's say coming from restaurants and so on, for the food waste is definitely a larger volume. Whether it's tied to like industrial waste or whether it's tied to the municipal waste depends actually on the municipalities. But yeah, that might also affect a lot in terms of the amount of organic waste. So, if there is a stream to collect business organic waste, and then to tie it together with the household waste would be nice
Yeah.
also to look
One
into.
of,
So,
one of the
mm,
nice initiatives you had in Kamikatsu at the waste sorting station was a big composter, a big electric composter, like for restaurants or hotels that maybe have a lot of kitchen waste to bring in or food waste to bring in, and they can do it at the big machine. And that is a great example of also of share economy, right? A wonderful people can share the machines. Not everybody needs their own machine. So there's so many great innovative examples there.
true. Well, like it also depends on the size of the restaurants or the cafes, so how much they actually produce the organic waste and so on. At the same time, like it's the tie with like how we can reduce organic waste from the production side as well. So yeah, it's definitely interesting to look into. Yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah,
it's wonderful. That is our hour. I think we
true.
could definitely talk for many hours. So I'd love to have you back again sometime in the future and talk about a different topic. You're involved with so many important work, not only for the label system, but also consulting with businesses, training people, advising, also working with the government. I don't know how you have the energy, but I appreciate everything you do so much. Thank you, Akira.
Thank you so much, JJ, for inviting, and then thank you so much for all this nice conversation. I hope I contributed some.
Oh, fantastic. And good luck with your course. You're now working on your master's and hopefully PhD as well. I don't think you need it, but I hope that you can get something out of all your research and study as well in Kyoto.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. And tomorrow at 9 a.m., we're talking about CSR, corporate social responsibility, and the activities that companies, big companies, can do to help with social impact and environmental awareness in their area. So please join us again tomorrow, 9 a.m. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much, Akira.